Howdy, folks. Spencer here, and today I want to talk about the changes to the superior Romulan operative bridge officer trait that Cryptic has announced on the latest 10 forward. And really, I want to answer the question of have Romulans lost the lead? So, as many of you know, Romulans have been like the min max faction of choice for basically like the last decade. And, I'm just curious if the changes that have been announced are going to impact that. So, what exactly is Superior Romulan Operative? Well, it's often referred to as SRO, and it's a bridge officer trait that you will find on certain Romulan bridge officers. And it gives you 2% crit chance, 5% severity, and then a power recharge speed bonus for cloaking. Now, this trait stacks, and specifically the crit boost on it do stack for each one of them that you have slotted. So if you have 5 of these SRO bridge officers on your ship, that is 10% crit chance and 25% severity. So what exactly is Cryptic changing about them? Well, the thing with them is that having a full set of these SRO bridge officers has been exclusive to the Romulan faction for, well, really since their release 9 or 10 years ago. And what the change is doing is that Cryptic is going to make it so you can get a full set of SROs on any faction. The existing way that you could get SROs on other factions was through the Fleet Embassy, and you could specifically only get tactical bridge officers that had the SRO trait. What Cryptic is going to do is they are going to add science and engineer bridge officers to the Fleet Embassy that will also have the SRO trait. They have specified that these ones are going to be very rare quality, which means that they're going to have a base cost of 160,000 fleet credits and 40,000 dilithium per. Of course, if you have your dilithium mine on your fleet upgraded, that will be discounted slightly. And this is part of a larger change that they're doing for fleets that will be coming out with an upcoming content release, probably late in September or early October. And basically, what they're doing is they're adding a bunch of new items into the existing holdings. They're not coming out with a new holding, but they're just adding additional things that you can buy from the existing holdings. We don't have an exact release date yet, but like I said, my guess is late September, early October. So the thing is, with you only being able to have tactical bridge officers that have the SRO trait on non-Romulan players, that has meant that you've had to use just random bridge officers in your non-tactical slots that provide you some sort of boost. The most common approach you will see for non-Romulans is that they'll have 2 to 3 tac bridge officers on their build, and those will all be SROs. And then you'll see people running like the hierarchy bridge officer from one of the Delta Quadrant missions in a science slot. And then they'll work on getting their diplomacy commendation up to tier 4 to get an additional pirate that's usually an engineer. That'll give them, just a small boost. So, as you can see here, if you look at the before and after for a non-Romulan player, if you currently have 3 SROs and then the hierarchy and the diplomacy bridge officer, you will be able to go over to 5 SROs, which is going to provide you an additional 4% crit chance and 10% severity. Of course, if you don't have as many SROs, if you only have 2 TAC SROs on right now, you will see a larger bonus when you move over to a full set of SROs. Now, SROs are not the only bridge officers that provide a decent boost in space, but they're the most accessible. The other ones that provide a really decent boost are the Jem'Hadar Vanguard bridge officers, and these are obtained through the Gamma expansion pack. The big one that costs you like 100 to 150 bucks in the C store. So these Vanguard bridge officers each provide some crit chance, severity, and then some Cat 1 weapon damage. The crit boost are not as high as a Romulan, but they make up for it by having that damage boost. And quite often, when you see a min-max player on a non-Romulan captain, they're using these Vanguard bridge officers, and that allows them already as is to really make up the difference between them and a Romulan. So For people that have the Vanguard bridge officers, they're not going to be seeing as much of a gain from being able to run a full set of SROs. Because right now, as someone that has 3 SROs and then 2 of the Vanguard bridge officers on is only losing out on 2% crit chance and 5% severity, but in exchange, they're getting 15% Cat 1 weapon damage. So, this change is really big for those of you that don't have access to the Gamma pack and those Jem'Hadar Vanguard bridge officers. But if you do have access, this change is really not going to be that huge. Now, if you're a Romulan player, this of course has no impact on you. The only advantage when it comes to SROs that a Romulan has is you don't have to go to the fleet embassy to get them. Anyone looking to set up a full set of SROs on a non-Romulan is going to be spending hundreds of thousands of fleet credits and hundreds of thousands of dilithium at the fleet embassy to do so. Whereas you on a Romulan, you get SROs super cheap. I can go to the exchange on my Romulan character and buy an SRO for sometimes under 100,000 EC. So SROs are still going to be much more accessible on a Romulan character. But if you're on a non-Romulan, there is at least a route now to go through and get SROs for all your slots. Now, the last thing I want to talk about for the before and after is Jem'Hadar Vanguard captains. And these are something that I feel have not gotten much attention from the player base in general. Jem'Hadar Vanguards actually already beat Romulans when it comes to the potential crit stats that they have. As you see here with this example I have at the bottom left and bottom right, as is a Jem'Hadar Vanguard really already has, 2.5% more crit chance, 2.5% more crit severity, and then that massive Cat 1 weapon damage boost potential over a Romulan player. And it's because the Vanguard captain itself has a massive crit boost associated with it. So if you are on a Jem'Hadar Vanguard captain and you decide that you want to run 5 SROs after this change, you're going to have a lead over a Romulan player of 4.5% crit chance and 7.5% crit severity. And then you're also going to get that additional weapon damage. So Jem'Hadar Vanguards are really good. Vanguard captains have that really huge passive captain trait that I just talked about, and you don't even have to slot it. It is just a passive boost built into the captain. But the bridge officers are really expensive to acquire. Even if you're a Vanguard captain, the only way that you can actually get the Vanguard bridge officers is by owning that Gamma expansion pack. As far as I am aware, there is no other source of Vanguard bridge officers right now. So I was also curious as to how a Vanguard captain would stack up against a Romulan player. And if you have all 3 of the Vanguard bridge officers slotted and only 2 SROs, you actually still have more crit chance than a Romulan player would that has 5 SROs. You have the same crit severity, but you also then have that huge weapon damage bonus that's Cat 1. And I plugged this in to this sheet that Jay had made for his meta-analysis breakdown of the different weapon firing modes. And I changed the values from my inquiry build to compensate for if I was a Vanguard captain and I had 3 of the Vanguard bridge officers on instead of 3 SROs. And it's not really that big, but it is a fairly significant bonus if you're someone looking at this from a min-max point of view. And for your weapons, playing a Vanguard captain instead of a Romulan could lead to like a 4% gain if you had the exact same build on this, on a Jem'Hadar character versus Romulan. So, for those of you that have been looking at setting up a character for really high-end min-max situations, Vanguards are something to consider. Now the question is, and the main title and talking point of this video was, have Romulans lost the lead? Well, Romulans have to have the lead to lose the lead, and as you know, I've just shown you, Jem'Hadar Vanguard specifically, already, had the lead in some certain scenarios, especially when looking at like the weapons focused setups where you don't care about cloaking. In that case, Jem'Hadar Vanguards have technically already had the lead for quite some time. Now, with these changes, Romulans are actually going to lose the lead in areas where they had the lead, and the most notable one is going to be for EPG builds. You see, for EPG, Romulans had the advantage because they could run the full set of SROs. But when I go back here, you see that a Jem'Hadar Vanguard with 5 SROs, well, that's got a fairly significant crit chance and severity lead over everything else. So, uh, Jem'Hadar Vanguards are now the top option when you are looking to min max an EPG build. And I think for some people that's going to be surprising, but when you look at the numbers, Jem'Hadar Vanguards just have that huge amount of crit chance and severity that they get just from being a Vanguard. Now, when it comes to cloaking, Romulans do still have the lead, and that will continue to be unless Cryptic decides to add all of the infiltrators to the embassy. So, right now, the only way you can fully take advantage of cloaking is with a full infiltrator setup on a Romulan character. This is how you can get up to 25.5 seconds of cloak ambush or she's a predator duration. And I talked about this in a recent video that I did going over the cloaking mechanics. Even if Cryptic adds the full set of infiltrators to the embassy, Romulans are still going to have an advantage due to the bridge officers they get with the Delta expansion pack. And I've got 2 of these shown over at the right, but the Romulans that have the Delta expansion pack can get some bridge officers that have multiple superior traits on them that are really good, and they're the only bridge officers that have those specific combos on the same bridge officer. So there's one of them, the tactical one, I believe, that has superior infiltrator and superior Romulan operative on the same bridge officer. And then the engineering one from that pack gets you superior Romulan operative and superior subterfuge, again on the same bridge officer. So even if Cryptic adds infiltrators into the embassy, Romulans should still have a slight lead technically because they have access to those bridge officers from the Delta expansion pack that give them multiple traits that are beneficial on the same bridge officers. Whereas if they do add the infiltrators to the embassy, you're going to have to be giving up SROs to run the infiltrators. So Romulans will have an advantage at cloaking, even if Cryptic adds those infiltrators to the embassy. Let's talk about how this all exactly impacts the meta. Well, the first thing, obviously, is that the entire player base has access to SRO bridge officers, which means that the entire player base has the potential to have, even higher performance. Now, obviously, you're not going to have everyone going out and getting these, so it's not going to make everyone a better player, but everyone having access does mean that the overall player base does have the potential to have higher performance if they decide to invest in these and learn to pilot their ship better. The largest meta impact is going to be for EPG. As is, Romulans were the kings when it came to EPG. They dominated over all the factions that you could go with, and with the Jem'Hadar Vanguards being able to get 5 SROs, Jem'Hadar Vanguards are going to have a 4.5% crit chance lead and 7.5% crit severity lead over the other factions for EPG. So EPG on the Jem'Hadar Vanguard is certainly going to be interesting to see if anyone that goes out and develops a character to get that bonus. So really, to summarize it from a meta point of view for DPS especially, Jem'Hadar Vanguards are going to be the top faction pick if you do not care about cloaking. But if you do care about cloaking, then Romulan faction is still going to be the best because Romulans are the only ones that can actually boost Cloak Ambush and traits like She's a Predator. So if you just really to recap that, if you care about cloaking, ROMs are still the best. If you don't care, Gem Vanguards will be the best. And just an overall recap of this video, non-Romulan captains are now going to be able to get a full set of SRO bridge officers from the Fleet Embassy. So for most of you that play on a non-Romulan, like a Fed character, you're going to be looking at getting an additional 4 to 6% crit chance and 10 to 15% severity, depending on your build, assuming you're already running 2 to 3 attack SROs. And at the end of the day, I really expect that most people that are doing min-max are still just going to make Romulan captains, just because it's much cheaper to make a Romulan captain than it is to set up one of those Jem'Hadar Vanguards. Because with the Jem'Hadar Vanguards, you do have to go out and buy the Gamma Pack. There's no other way to get the Vanguard Bridge Officers, as far as I am aware. So I still think Romulans are better from a value point of view, and the fact that they can still take advantage of cloaking. But I think that there's going to be a few people that are now interested in setting up Jem'Hadar Vanguards, and I fully expect to see them getting a bit more attention moving forward. That's going to be it for this video. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them down below. I think I've covered most of the points here, but if there's anything I missed, feel free to just drop it down below and I will respond when I can. Once again, thank you to all channel members for the continued support. And stay tuned, because this Friday I'm going to be going over the Temporal Recruit event and the various rewards that you can get from doing it. But that's going to be it for today. Thanks for watching. See you guys next time.